Hey everybody, let's have a chat about the studio, if you want. It had to do with password hashing and salting. So the code that was introduced to you in the prep work for today, the Get It Done app today, will come in handy. In fact, you were expected to use that code or similar code to complete the studio today. And so actually the first thing that I wanted to do was just kind of go over that code and make sure that we understand exactly what's going on with it. And then we'll figure out how to incorporate that into the rest of our app. I'm going to skip this first function and go down to the second one, make password hash. And so this first section right here says if not salt, we're going to make one. What is that? How does that work? What is that telling us to do? What's the Python magic behind this code? Why would there not be a salt, I guess, is sort of the main question that I have about this section. I'm sorry? If it was just made, or if I'm making a new user for the first time, we have to look actually up at the way this function is defined. It says salt equals none. That's what we call a default parameter. It's a default value. So if I don't tell you what the salt is, then I'm just going to assume it's going to be none. That's what we're saying with this particular section of code, right? And that's going to happen the first time that we create a user. They aren't going to have a salt yet. But then we're going to make one for them. That's what this first if statement is doing. And so you can see that it calls this first function that I skipped. So what is this first function doing? What do I expect to get out of this first function? We can take a look. You see ASCII letters involved, random choice involved. So it should just be 5 random characters, 5 random letters. That's going to be our salt. Just going to randomly choose 5 letters. Could be uppercase or lowercase, we don't know. Or some mixture of the two. So we're going to choose 5 random letters and use that as our salt. All right, this next line here shows their hash function in action. So here's our SHA-256 hash. And then we can see that I've taken that salt and tacked it onto the end of the password. So we're now this is what I was talking about before during the review session, right? Assuming that our users aren't going to choose a different password for each website. So we're going to make their password a little bit random by choosing this random salt and adding it onto the password. And then the last thing that we're going to do, you see the return here looks a little interesting, 0, 1. So I have 2 values. I have the hash and the salt. I want to return them both. But in Python, I can only return one thing. So I have to take both of those values, the hash and the salt, and combine them together with a comma in between. That's what that last line of code is doing. So that's how we make a new password or a new hash for a new user who's just registered for our site. And then the last function to take a look at is check password hash. So we're expecting that the hash is going to come in the same format that we just talked about, with the hash first, then a comma, then followed by the salt. So then this line is just separating those two chunks. It looks a little weird to see the parentheses and the square brackets side by side like that, right? If we just focus on this part, what's the result of hash.split? What does that give back? A list with, in this case, 2 values. The first value will be the hash, and the second value will be the salt. And so that's where the square brackets come in. We're grabbing the second value, the value of position 1, which is the salt. All right? Then we pass that salt back into make password hash. So we're basically asking it to recreate the hash and checking to make sure that that's the same as what we have stored in our database. And if they match, then they've typed in the same password. And we know that that user is who they say they are, so we can allow them to proceed. Otherwise, we're gonna kick them out. Are there any questions about what these functions do? Because our next step is to go incorporate them into our flick lists app. That's the last thing we need to do for today. It's actually not a lot of code to manipulate. There's 2 things that we have to do. We have to take care of when a new user is created, and then also when a user wants to log in again, right? So we should probably do the user creation first, because that'll affect how the login process works. And so where in the code do I need to make some changes for creating users now with a hashed password instead of the actual password? Where in the code is that going to affect? Which pieces? The user object. That's where I was storing the password before, right? It was in the user object. And that'll still be true, but I don't want to store the actual password anymore. I want to store the hash now. And so we can update our code to reflect that. So we need to import some stuff from hashutils. Since we're interested in creating new users right now, that's going to be the make password function. Import make password hash. And so instead of storing the password here, right? That's no longer what we're storing. We're now going to store the hash of the password, which means that down here, I'm not just going to take the password that they typed in and store it to the object, right? I'm going to actually pass that into the make password hash function to generate the hash value. And in this particular case, they don't have a salt yet. This user is brand new. They don't exist yet. They don't have a salt, so I'm not gonna pass anything in for the salt. I'm just gonna let it make up a new salt and use that. Okay? And actually, those two lines I think are the only things that we need to do to have hashing incorporated into our database. We have to fix the login still, but let's make sure that we fix the database up first. Because I changed these values and how they work, I have to get rid of my old database and make it all over again. So we've done that several times now. I'll just go through it kind of quickly here. From main import db. Oh, and then I actually needed to import the models as well. User and movie. db.drop all should get rid of the tables, and then db.create all. So I had to get rid of my old tables because that was storing the actual passwords, and we don't want to do that anymore. We want to store the hashes. Because I changed the model, I had to drop everything and recreate it. And so that means that when I go start up my website now, I'm going to have to make a new user because I just deleted all of my users. When I dropped the tables, so I should be able to do that part at least. Let's grab this. Oops, I hit the wrong button. Sorry. My fault. Hit the wrong button there. All right, let's go to our page now and need to register a new account. I'm just going to keep it simple. All right, so I created a new account, and I should actually be able to go into the database now and see that it's not storing my password, but it's storing the hash of my password. So let's verify that real quick, because that's a big security improvement. So I need to open up phpMyAdmin. Oh, it's taking a little longer than usual. It's trying. Sure. I'm sorry? Oh, the import statements? Where did that go? I had to do my imports on two separate ones. So from main import db, remember the last studio we actually moved the models out of main, so I can't import them all the same way that I used to. So I had to do two imports, one for the db and then one for my models, since they're now in a different module. I think this is up and running now, so I should be able to go find flick list And in my user table, I now hope to see hashes. And there we go. There's the password hash. You guys don't know what my password is anymore. It's hi. Oh, sorry. I shouldn't have said that. That's what it is, though. I can see the password hash and the salt. But we're still not done yet. If I go back here and I hit log out and then I try to go log in again as the user that I just created, it doesn't work. We have a problem. So I haven't fixed the login piece yet. Actually, this error here says object has no attribute password. Why is that? We changed it to password hash, right? So that doesn't exist anymore. So I have to go figure out where in my code I was doing that. And here you can see it's checking the login on line 33. So I can go to line 33. Oops, not of this file though. Of this file. I can go to line 33. And instead of user password, right, I can say user password hash, which is what I changed it to. Is this good? Will this work? We can try it. Let's try it and see what happens. Bad username or password. I promise I typed it in correctly. You'll have to take my word for that, but there's something else that we need to fix. Yeah.
Like when you first created a user password hash, you created salt with
Correct?
hash.
Yep.
So I guess the question is, when you are logging in as registered, like someone is registered, when you submit your password into the database, is it also taking that salt that was created and providing it with the password?
That's the question. Is that happening right now or not? You did, right? So the question was, when we registered a user, we created that salt, right? And so now when we log a user in, we have to grab the salt, add it to the whatever password they typed in, and then recreate the hash. Am I doing that right now? I'm actually not. We actually have a function for that purpose. It's called check PW hash. So I need to use this function. Right now what we're doing, password is whatever they typed in the box. That's the word hi in this case. And we're checking it against the salted and hashed password that is stored in the database. Those should never match. If those match, then something really strange is happening. You should go buy a lottery ticket, I guess. The odds of that happening are very, 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 very small. So we need to actually hash the value that they typed in and compare that against the hash value that was stored in the database. That's the problem. So we're going to import the check from hash utils, import check password hash, and then we're going to use that function down here, line 33. So here I can actually just take this whole thing out and say check password hash, and then feed in the plain text password that they typed into the box, and then the hash password from the database. I forget which order is which, so let me double check and see. So the plain text password first, and then the hash comes second. Okay. Password, oops. User dot password hash. All right. So it'll grab the salt, hash it with the password, and then compare that against the hash that's stored in the database. And if those are correct, it'll return true here, which should log in our user. Otherwise, we typed in the wrong password and it'll say false. So let's try that one final time. All right, cool. It logged us in. We're good. So actually, I think I only changed maybe 3 or 4 lines of code in the whole studio, not counting the stuff from the prep work that I added onto the studio as well, those functions. I think that's it. Are there any questions about what we did? All right, fantastic. Well, I will see you then on Thursday for the last day of Unit 2.